Hello dear viewers, and welcome to another video from me here in the ancient dwarven hold of our ancestors. After much role-playing and smiting evildoers, I have finally completed Baldur's Gate 3. It has taken me a good while, but it was enjoyable every minute. That does indeed foreshadow my appreciation of the title, but I think you knew I liked it already. Before we get going proper, if I could beseech you, dear viewer, that if you like what I do down here in the ancient hold and have yet to subscribe, then if you might consider doing so, and maybe leave a like and comment with your thoughts on the game, I would really appreciate it. I am very grateful for everyone that looks at this old dwarf's content. Baldur's Gate 3 is a computer role-playing game based on the D&D 5th edition rule set in the Forgotten Realms setting of Dungeons & Dragons. It was developed and published by Larian Games and was released for PC in August 2023. There have been quite a few games released in this setting over the years, which is probably because there is so much rich lore and content to draw from. There be goblins and orcs and dragons and elves and all sorts entwined here in the game, and yes dear viewers, there be dwarves aplenty. If you've been watching any of my videos on Baldur's Gate 3, or the great level of interest from media sites and such, you might have realised we are dealing with something special here, and though a joyous thing, it sadly isn't a common occurrence in the modern world of video gaming. And that is such a shame. But we must stroke our beards happily as we hold up those that still go by the old ways of making video games, selling it complete with no microtransactions or other tomfoolery. The game is set sometime after Baldur's Gate 2, and no dear viewer, you do not have to have played either of the previous games to understand what is going on here. There is of course a few additions to the game which ye players of the Baldur's Gate might recognise. Upon loading up, you can take a look at the settings available. The graphical options are fairly extensive, with different sliders and such for all the fancy spiffy things you might hope for. You can even select which graphics API to use between DirectX and Vulkan. There are a good few gameplay settings as well, allowing you to change various aspects in game, like having a mini-map always facing north or setting the dice to be karmic, evening out streaks of bad luck, just to name a few. From the main menu, you can start a new game or carry on with a previous one. When creating a new game, you can select the difficulty you wish to play on, which can be changed at any time in the options screen. The first of the difficulties is Explorer, which is somewhat analogous to an easy setting. In this mode, the focus is more about the roleplay and non-combat parts of Baldur's Gate 3, like character interactions and quests and such. Enemies have much reduced health points in combat, and your own characters have a higher than normal chance to land their attacks. It appears you are unable to multi-class in this difficulty though. The balanced difficulty setting, like a fine dwarven blade, is indeed well balanced, with combat proving somewhat of a challenge but still forgiving and not overly tough. It was this difficulty which I selected for my playthrough, and one I imagine most players would do as well. The final difficulty setting is Tactician, which, I am told, is quite the challenge, with fights involving more enemies, extra hazards like fires and such, and that baddies will make use of new tactics, like focusing on squishy characters and attempting to outright kill party members, rather than just down them. If you are new to the genre, or just wish to focus more on story, then I would suggest the Explorer setting. If you wish to have a bit of a challenge but not be overwhelmed in every fight, then balanced is the way to go. If you're really up for a great challenge, then I would go for Tactician. And remember dear viewers, there's nothing wrong with choosing lower difficulties. You bought the game, you can play it any way you choose. In the beginning, in the mountains, you have the option to either create your own character or use one of the pre-made heroes as provided by the developer. I would say, and seemingly from Larian's own statistics, most players go for creating their own character. Dungeons & Dragons is all about constructing your own unique avatar in game and role-playing them how you wish, rather than using someone else's pre-built version. For me at least anyway. Of course, if you choose to use a pre-created one, then that is fine as well. All the different races you can pick from the tabletop game are available here, along with the classes. You can be any race you want with any class you should choose, so no race is hindered in taking any specific class. Obviously, I chose a mighty dwarf, but if you really want to play another race, I will let you off this time. I was flirting with the idea of a cleric or a druid, but decided to go with a paladin, as it wasn't a selection I chose to use before while playing other games. I also thought it'd be fun smiting evilry. It turns out this was quite a popular class. There are a lot of settings you can tweak during the construction of your character, allowing you to create a bespoke hero suiting your will. Many are there hair options going on here, but I would have to say I would have appreciated a better selection of great dwarven beards. Act 1 of Baldur's Gate sees you crash landing in the Nautilid ship, having been taken prisoner by evil mind flayer Illithids, who implanted a mind parasite into your head. Once you've pulled yourself together, you set off on a mission to rid yourself of the things swirling around your skull before you metamorphise into one of the terrifying mind flayers, your own being totally lost. You will come across other survivors of the crash, which each have their own parasite jiggling about in their minds. You will gather those around you as you explore the neighbouring lands in search of salvation from the most terrible transformation. You will come across nearly all of your possible companions very early on, which is actually quite a relief, as you can then begin adventuring with a full group almost from the get-go. There is a maximum of 4 people in your party, including yourself. This is fine and all, but I must say I would have preferred a bigger group, but it isn't deal-breaking. The companions are varied and unique in their design from each other. There is a wizard with a strange desire to eat magical items lest he be destroyed, a strong-willed Githyanki warrior who always speaks her mind and isn't too bothered about other people's feelings, and a cleric who follows the teachings of a dark master and carries a strange artifact. These are just some of them, with the rest being just as interesting. There are personalities here that will likely appeal to a wide range of players that will no doubt have varying setups of their main party while adventuring. I think it's worth going off on a tangent a little concerning party makeup, that is, the various roles of your group of adventurers and how they interact with one another. In D&D, other tabletop RPGs and games like World of Warcraft and others, there is this notion of the tank, the healer and the damage dealer. When you are forming a group, it is good to try and fill these roles if at all possible. It is wise to have a party member with a high AC from a shield, heavy armour, etc. that can stand on the front line and tank hits by monsters and other baddies without getting clobbered for their effort. This could be a fighter, a cleric, a paladin or a druid in animal form, as well as evasive characters like a monk, moving swiftly aside the blows from the enemy. I managed to have myself a paladin be pretty tanky, while Shadowheart with a shield had a decently high armour class. You will do well to have someone who can heal in your party. Someone who is able to restore hit points to your companions as they take damage. The healer. This could be a druid or cleric or even a paladin or bard, but I chose Shadowheart to also fill this role of a healer, as clerics have access to so many different healing spells. My paladin too was capable of throwing out some big heals when needed. For the rest of the party, it is advisable to look for heroes that can pump out a lot of damage to thy foes, while the tank takes the attention of the enemy and your healer keeps everyone alive. Besides my paladin, who could dish out some sizable damage, I had Gale in the party for large parts of the playthrough. Wizards have access to some devastating spells which do serious damage to swathes of the enemy, as well as some useful crowd control. Besides my paladin, Shadowheart and often Gale, I would rotate the 4th member of the party between the other companions as I fancied at the time. The first act of Baldur's Gate 3, which encompasses the immediate area around the crash site and beyond, acts as a large and fun-filled introduction to the various aspects of the game. As you seek a way to rid yourselves of the Illithid parasite in your head, you'll become involved with other plots and quests as they unfold. Your party will become entwined in the protection of a druid's grove, deal with strange necromantic books, and combat a large force of goblins under the leadership of 3 true souls who themselves have illithid tadpoles in their heads. There are lots of opportunities to engage with various aspects of the game. You will get used to active skill checks, rolling a d20 yourself for things like lockpicking, and passive checks like perception and initiative. There is ample opportunity too to roleplay as the person you wish your main character to be, through the decisions and responses to situations in game. As a noble paladin dwarf, I went with a virtuous and humble knight who stood by the victims of evilry and injustice. While role-playing a gallant knight of justice this way, I often find myself in violent trouble as I have to stand up for those being oppressed. It is fine though, as besides the experience from all the combat, I knew I was keeping my oath as a paladin. The combat in game, of which I participated in a lot during my playthrough, is turn-based rather than real-time with pause, like in previous Baldur's Gate games. If you're coming from either of those games or any of those Infinity Engine titles, you might need some time to get used to this different way of doing things. Simply, each of the heroes plus the groups of enemies on commencement of battle will have the game rolling their initiative, thusly assigning turn order for the combat. Highest initiative goes first and the lowest will go last. Once it is their turn to activate, each combatant will be able to move a certain distance, take an action, and also take a bonus action. Moving is simple enough, with each hero having a maximum distance they can move on their go. An action can be used for all sorts of things like throwing something, helping someone up, sprinting, etc. But the usual thing to do would be to make an attack or cast some sort of spell or ability. For melee characters, this could be making a number of swings with a sword, while a wizard or warlock might bring a battery of flame to bear as a fireball in the enemy's face. Bonus actions are a small subset of actions that can be performed in addition to a normal action. Some spells, usually not damaging ones, can be cast while some special attacks, such as my Paladin's Pommel Strike, can also be performed. As you level up, you will unlock a wider range of skills to use. Besides swinging swords and casting spells, there is a whole other side of confrontations with bad guys. There are all sorts of environmental options, like exploding a barrel full of gunpowder or throwing a vial of oil at a baddie and then setting it aflame. You can knock people off cliffs or take hold of them should you have the strength and lob them far afield. There is this free-form feel to things, like you're in a sandbox where you can really get creative with things, which I believe suits Dungeons & Dragons really well. I do like the combat in Baldur's Gate 3. I think the difficulty of balance worked really nicely for me. Most fights seemed winnable and could be overcome with a few goes if needed, so I didn't feel really stressed or frustrated with a lack of progress when engaging with bad guys. The older CRPGs like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Icewind Dale, along with some more contemporary titles, instead of turn-based combat, make use of the real-time with pause combat system. Everything is played out in real time with the player constantly pausing and assigning actions to each of their party members. If you come from this sort of background and not experienced much turn-based combat before, then the combat here might take a little while to get used to. But I think personally it works really well. The tabletop version takes turns as set by initiative, so it's essentially the same thing here. I'm not suggesting a real time with pause wouldn't work, but rather turn-based fits really well. In other games I've played, the sheer amount of buffs and debuffs that can be applied to my own characters and the enemies can feel a little overbearing and require quite an extensive knowledge of things to perform well. Perhaps it is the 5th edition rule set or how Larian has implemented it, but combat has a good amount of depth without too much in the way of I really need to precast a load of buffs just before combat and have all these other things running to actually come out victorious. You can still do a lot of those min-maxing style things, but the game is a little more lenient on you, in balanced setting at least. I fully understand that in tactician difficulty you probably want to get every edge you can possibly get. As you adventure across the land, uncovering more of the story and putting an end to all kinds of evilry, you will acquire experience points. Once you've accumulated enough, you will reach a new level and will be able to level up your character. This involves clicking the level up on the particular character's portrait and being taken to the level up screen. Depending on your class and level, you'll be presented with new skills and abilities that your character has attained. For some characters, like spellcasters, you can select which new spells you wish to learn. Others, like fighters, tend to receive new skills by default with little in the way of selection. At early levels, most classes will be able to select a specialisation which will affect the skills you will learn and provide certain abilities going forward. Sometimes when you level up, it will be not the most exciting affair, depending on your class, but you'll periodically unlock powerful features like extra attacks, feats, and great spells with which to defeat your foes. Your characters usually level up around the same time as each other, and thankfully when adding a companion to your party, they will immediately gain all of the experience they have missed. In this way you can change party members as you like, without worrying about losing experience. As you grow more powerful on your journeys, you will require lots of new skills and abilities, and, depending on your class, your action bar will be quite full of them. You can enlarge your action bars to a maximum of 4 deep, but even then, some classes will struggle to have all of their options visible on the screen. Besides all the fighting and levelling up, you'll be partaking in no small amount of conversing, both with your party members and everyone you come across on your journey across the land. For characters to be believable and interesting, their personalities, as conveyed by their voice actor, needs to come across with some passion and sincerity. Luckily, dear viewers, this is the case with Baldur's Gate 3. From the grandest characters and most important cast members to lowly goblins with a couple of lines of voice, this acting is indeed top-notch. There has clearly been a lot of effort here and it pays off really well. The personalities come through wonderfully, with villains invoking your disdain and apparent heroes giving you hope. But don't think it's a simple case of black and white, far from it. There are characters that are very grey in their moral makeup, including your own companions. This makes for a wonderful world of various characters to interact with that each have their own motivations and goals. Besides all this other stuff, there are decisions to be made during your campaign that have a tangible impact on your own story and the world around you. Simply helping someone out of a capsule might have a great thread of your story plucked. A lot of the weird stuff people do in the pen and paper version can be realised here in game. You could distract a bunch of baddies with some loot playing while you steal their stuff. You can kill a bad guy and then talk to his dead body. You can pile up crates and climb them before jumping to a ledge. The possibilities here are quite liberating and often entertaining. The grand overall story is so very well written, with fun twists and turns that keep you engaged through all levels of play. Events ramp up and up with new interesting and eyebrow-raising moments throughout the several acts of the game. Just when I thought things were getting pretty crazy, something even more strange and wonderful would happen. Baldur's Gate 3 is very much jammed full of content. The actual maps of each of the acts are not vast, but they don't need to be, as every step you take in this fantasy world leads to some interesting new encounter. I think the phrase here is all killer and no filler. Instead of vast areas with fun stuff sprinkled about the place, Baldur's Gate 3 uses every metre of world space to create new stories and encounters for your heroes to experience. And that, dear viewers, is probably the thing to take away here. This game is full of wonderful experiences for you to delve into and enjoy. There is so much, in fact, that you'll undoubtedly not see everything there is to see in one playthrough. There has clearly been just so much effort and love put into Baldur's Gate 3. It is obvious from the very first minutes to tens of hours in that Larian has gone all in here, pulling out all the stops to make this a wonderful game. It might seem that I'm overly lathering this game with praise, but that is because I am. As an avid role-playing game enjoyer, Baldur's Gate 3 has ticked all the right boxes and then some. I got to roleplay as a mighty and noble dwarf while partaking in wonderfully written quests at a storyline that was enthralling to the end. This is not to say, of course, the game is perfect. There are things I'd like to see improved, like managing items across all your characters and not just those currently in the party. I still think the party size could have been one bigger as well. There are a lot of companions, and having to leave people out for large swathes of gameplay is not something I enjoy. I would love to have been able to arrange the spells and skills on my action bars as I saw fit. So, final thoughts on things. Baldur's Gate 3 is an incredible achievement by Larian. From my own experience with their other games and being of the gaming world for as long as I have been, this is one of the best games I've played, full stop. And let me be clear, dear viewers, as an old dwarf with a white beard, I know what I personally enjoy and what I don't. To me, this game is so far up my street that I can't just not shower it with praise. I'm not saying that everyone will enjoy it though. If you aren't into fantasy computer role-playing games in general, then perhaps this won't be for you. Though saying this, if you have even an inkling towards this genre, I would check this out when you can. For players of this genre with these sorts of themes, this is, in this old dwarf's view, the pinnacle of this kind of experience. There are still things it could do better, like mightier beards, but it does so much so well that it stands true in a genre of mighty peers. This is the first game in years I've paid a full price for at a premium cost, and I'm very much glad that I did so. And there we go, dear viewers, with my most mighty review yet of one of these here video games. It is longer than my other videos, but I hope you understand that Baldur's Gate 3 to me more than deserved that sort of attention. Thank you for watching this far. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing. Thank you, dear viewers, and I shall see you next time.